Lisa, today on the Art of Relationships podcast, we have some special guests joining us, of course. Why don't you introduce our guests? Yeah.
Yes, we sure do. All the way hailing from Atlanta, Georgia. We have Shaunti Feldhahn. Shaunti she did her graduate work at Harvard, and she was an analyst on Wall Street. Can you believe that? And then she just happened to become like an award-winning, world-renowned author on social research. And so it's actually, we use her material all the time at our conferences and our premarital counseling. And so she's just written some incredible books that have been groundbreaking. Several of them, I think you have over 3 million books sold. Is that right, Shaunti?
Yeah, it's crazy. That is just a God thing. I don't know how that happened.
And what percent do you get from each of those 3 million? It's got to be a dollar.
You can answer up for a donation.
Not enough.
Not enough. Well, and then anything I do get goes into the research for the next book, you see. So
I bet that's right.
It's that cycle, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then our additional guest there is Brian Goins. We've known Brian for about 5 years now because he's kind of our boss.
Yeah,
he is.
Don't you forget it.
You won't let us, will you? This hour, we know he is the director of strategic projects. Yeah, senior director of strategic projects at FamilyLife, and he also helps lead the Weekend to Remember speaker team, of which we're a part of it, and that's where we got to know. Brian.
We met him at a McDonald's right by LAX. I remember.
That's right.
Our interview.
Yeah. He said,
he's taking the best places on the Weekend to Remember speaking team. You get the best restaurants, anything you want from the kids menu.
Oh gosh.
Well, Brian, you've also produced an amazing documentary, I think, that a lot of our audience will be interested in hearing about, and that's called The Brain, the Heart, and the World, right? It's a series exploring the dangers of pornography, and Brian, I know that has impacted and helped a lot of people as well. And so thank you both for joining us. And you guys host an amazing podcast. Tell us about your podcast real quick.
Yeah, so it's based with FamilyLife's podcast network. It's called Married with Benefits. Now make sure when you search for that, it's FamilyLife's Married with Benefits. There's another rogue one out there that we got to get our lawyers on because we copyrighted the name. So they need to cease and desist. But if you go to one, you're going to get a totally different podcast. It's one where we really want to get back to the joys of what God intended when he said, I do, that he really intended this for human flourishing and for us to flourish as couples. And so we started it, gosh, I don't know how long it's been, Shaunti, 5-6 years ago now. I think. And so it's one of these things where we had an idea of just going from the questions perspective. Like, what are some basic questions that husbands ask? What are questions that every wife asks? What are questions that couples ask about intimacy? And then what are the small little things that you can do of highly happy couples? And so we just take topics. It's more seasonal in nature than it is kind of an ongoing podcast. And so when I'm at conferences and I hear a lot of different questions being asked, I just kind of put a group together and I call the expert, Shaunti, and say, Shaunti, help us answer some of these things. And we just have a good time putting it together. It's been a fun ride.
Shaunti, when you were in your college years, did you ever dream that you'd have a podcast on Sexpectations? Was that your goal in life?
Until I did the research on this book, I literally couldn't say the word from the stage. Like, I'd be talking about whatever, and then I'd be like, and sex. And like, anytime Jeff and I would do marriage conferences, I was always reluctant to talk about it. But yeah, no, this was definitely not on the radar. And honestly, it wasn't until, I just do tons of interviews with people. I do tons of research, and this topic comes up a lot. So it was really clear that this needed to be one of the projects. So.
Yeah, and when you guys get on and do this program and you're live and you're talking about things like this, you use questions that you've received obviously during your research interviews, Brian, you have small groups that you oftentimes do research with and talk with. You both have broad exposure nationwide. What comes to mind if you had to sum up? What's the biggest question that you're getting that they want, or their biggest worries and concerns? What do they always ask?
Well, that's good, Shaunti. I know that you did a ton of the research on it, and so why don't you start? I obviously have some ideas, but I'd love to hear what you say to that.
I will tell you the number one question.
There you go.
That everybody asks. They kind of come up with it.
How often?
How often should you?
Yep. Yeah.
That is totally the number one question.
Yeah. Now they're not asking you personally. They're asking more broadly.
What should we do? And here's the ironic thing. Like when I say we, I mean my husband Jeff and I, when we started the research for this, we're like, there is no way in the world that we can do this project on our own. Like if we got something just slightly wrong, like you could do damage in people's lives and in their marriages. And so we started working with Dr. Michael Seitzma, who's this renowned sex therapist. He's trained most of the Christian sex therapists out there. And we knew we needed a co-author. And so we actually asked him, we're like, we constantly get this question.
Yeah.
How often should we? He was like, yeah, that's going to be your number one. And he's like, under no circumstances should you ever answer that question.
Now why did he say that? What's the reason?
Well, his point, and it's a really, really important one, is that every marriage is different.
Yeah.
Right? Like every couple has different issues. The analogy that he used, which I thought was a really good one, he was like, look, if you were to come up to me and ask me a question that you think there's an answer to, because people think there's an answer to the how often should you have sex question. He's like, if you come up to me and say, should we have a pet? He's going to be like, I don't know. Do you travel a lot? Are you allergic? Do you have the money for a pet? Like, I don't know. Like, it's all dependent on the variables in your life, in your relationship. And he's like, it's kind of like that. Like, I don't know what the good answer is for you. Do you have medical issues? What's your work schedules like? Do you have kids running around? How's your relationship? Like,
are you allergic? All kinds of issues.
Thank you, Brian. That's right where my mind went as well.
I'm sure.
But I think I think just to jump on that, because I think I think the thing that we just don't realize, and I know you guys deal with so many couples and students that all have that. Right. When I was in college or right before I got married, I remember having my own expectations about what that number would be or could be or should be. I mean, I honestly thought that the sex shop when I got married was going to be open 24/7. That was my expectation. And if you were to ask me how often, it'd be like, well, probably more than anybody else. I mean, it was all about the numbers. And
no wonder Jen's so tired.
Yeah. Well, I realized real quickly that, man, it was more like banker's hours. It wasn't 24/7. It was, brick and mortar banking. It was closed a lot more times than it was open. It seemed like, sometimes the teller had a headache, all kinds of issues that you come in contact with. And I think the thing that I really appreciate about the book that Dr. Seitzma and Shaunti and Jeff did is it really helped give couples an opportunity to do what they don't typically do. That is have a conversation about this versus an expectation. Yeah. So we have all these expectations, but our culture hasn't trained us how to have a conversation. And so you have so many of those expectations and you're not trained on how to talk about it. So then what you're left with is disappointment, disillusionment, depression, and you don't really know where to go. Like where do you go to talk about it?
I think that I love that phrase that says expectations without communication leads to frustration. And I think that's the biggie when it comes to this area. Two areas that couples seem to have the hardest time having conversations about: money and sex.
Yeah.
And so we find that when we have this session at our Weekend to Remember conferences, it's well attended. It's really well attended. And most of the questions that we get in the panel time, I found especially this last time, most of the questions had to do with sex.
Mhm.
And so I think the question that you mentioned, Shaunti, you know, how many times should you, you know, that key word is should versus do.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Right.
and now that we know that, you know, there's no one right answer, one of the things that we often do though, like if Jeff and I are doing a marriage event, right, like doing a marriage conference or a date night or whatever, like often the pastor will be like, can you talk about this topic? Like,
Yeah.
can you make sure you add this in? It's like, yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is, everybody is understandably curious about what else is happening out there, because this is an issue that's so sacred and so private. We don't even talk about it with our closest friends. Like literally the only input most of us have on this topic is from what you heard in the locker room when you were 16 or what you see in the movies, neither of which are the best sources of good information. And so I do think it is helpful for people to know that there is another one of the questions people ask is, what's normal? Like, you know, and there's a wide range of normal. And so that's encouraging for people. Like when you look at we have a pie chart that we put up on the screen of, you know, how often, you know, what percentage of couples are really not having much intimacy in their life, and a few times a month and a few times a week, and like, you know, 3 or 4 times a week. And it's really interesting because the pie chart is basically like a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter. Like there's no bell curve. It's just a wide array of normal.
You know, Shaunti, that reminds me of the quarter. Reminds me a little bit. Brian, you helped produce a video that is shown throughout the country. It's shown at almost every marriage conference, and I just think it really can help and does help a lot of people. You used a little bit of Shaunti's work, I would imagine, Brian, but when you put that video together, you described, I think there were 3 different categories of people when it comes to sex drive, when it comes to desire. And Brian, why don't you just explain that right quick? Because I think it's one of the best videos.
It was eye-opening.
It really was.
Well, I got to credit to where credit's due. I mean, Dr. Seitzman and Shaunti Feldhahn were the ones to really give us and help us write the script for it. And so, Shaunti, feel free to jump in, but you know.
Oh no, you're the one who put it into something very understandable. You go.
Well, it really, because it shows, it talks about how we have really there's 3 different desire types. You know, you have different levels of desire, but you also have different types, like just how you think about and process. When does sex come into the mind? Because I thought Jen would think the exact same way as I did, my wife Jen. And so I thought, well, I would think that if I'm thinking about sex, she's probably thinking about sex. And then I get married and realize that no, it wasn't on her mind nearly as often as it was on my mind. And I thought, well, wait, something's wrong.
Brian, that was so disappointing for me when I realized she was not thinking. I used to sit there
every
and
7 seconds.
But why not? Why don't you think? I don't get
Right.
it. Do you not find me attractive?
Something wrong with me? And I know that and when we talk, let me just give the 3. You know, you have initiating desire, which is probably sounds like more you and me, Chris. You have more of a you have initiating desire. You have what's the second one? Receptive desire. I was about to say resistant. I was like, no, that's last. You have initiating desire. You have receptive desire, where there has to be some type of prompt, some type of putting into the mood is what we've ended up hearing. It's just like there's got to be some way to help me get warmed up towards this idea. And then you have resistant desire, which it was super helpful to hear from Dr. Seitzman and Shaunti on this, that really only 7% of spouses report having resistant desire, which means I'm not interested and I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
And it would be and there's all kinds of reasons for that. Could be whether it's medical, whether it's some type of emotional issue that's going on, that's worth figuring out why is there resistant desire. But for most couples, they've got either initiating or receptive. And here was the big kicker. What's the stat, Shaunti? Is it 85% are not matched up?
90.
90%.
And so
Wow.
tell me how that, I mean, that was probably a quick revelation, Brian, both for you and
Oh,
Shaunti.
it's huge, Shaunti. You know, when you think that
Yeah.
basically 9 out of 10 couples don't have the same desire type.
Well, it's more, here's the thing that was like, I mean, this just made my head spin. Like we have been studying these things for 20 years. And in some of the early research for the research we did on men and women, like some of this had come out. Like this has been in the research literature amongst academics for like 40 years or something. But what I hadn't really put together until this project was that for people with initiating and receptive desire, which tend to be more likely men and women in that order, men tend to be more likely initiating, women tend to be more likely receptive, although there's plenty of exceptions. Honestly, the thing that just got me was that the desire, the feeling of desire, the physiology of it happens in the reverse order.
Oh,
Like I hadn't put that together, where someone
yeah.
who has initiating desire, it's kind of like what you see in Hollywood, right? Like you look across the room, the guy and the girl, the eyes meet and there's a spark and they feel this hunger, and pretty soon they're kissing and their clothes are off and they're in bed, right? And so it's like they feel this sense of desire and they do something about it. I hadn't put together that receptive desire, the physiology works in the reverse order. So the person with receptive desire literally does not feel that sense of desire. They decide, they're making an intellectual decision to decide to get engaged with their spouse, knowing that, you know, it'll be good as they go. This is not coercion. This is literally just a decision. And as the physiology starts getting stimulated, and by the way, this is all assuming that the relationship is positive, that it's not, this is not an abusive situation. This is just like a normal average couple, where it's viewed positively. As the physiology starts getting stimulated, then the sense of desire arises that maybe their partner felt 10 minutes ago. And so what we always tell people, if you are an initiating desire person married to a receptive desire person, the key is to recognize that your spouse is making a decision to engage based on how they feel about you in the relationship the rest of the day.
That's a powerful insight.
And it's this mind-blowing, eye-opening thing for a lot of people to realize, oh, it's not about just, oh, you need to help with the chores and, oh, you need to do this. All those things are good, but unless you're like developing not just the environment, but also like flirting and like putting little thoughts in somebody's mind, giving them anticipation, they're just not going to be thinking about it.
You know, it makes me think of one thing you hear of in our culture when people want to support or defend the idea of premarital sex is the argument, well, we need to see if we're sexually compatible. We just need to make sure we're sexually compatible. And something that Julie Slattery has said before is that of course we're not compatible. We're not sexually compatible. And what you're saying right there, Shaunti, is exactly, I mean, that 90% of couples are not sexually compatible, but that doesn't mean that it spells the doom of your sexual intimacy, part of your relationship. You can actually learn how to navigate that in a really healthy, giving, loving way if you understand the basis of it that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think that's a big mind shift, isn't it? Because it helps us to start thinking, going, what am I approach sex as, what am I going to get out of it? There was a very much of there's a consumer mindset I think most of us have when it comes to sex. Like there's this expectation that I'm going to get joy, I'm going to get, and I'm going to get it out of it the way I want it, the way I naturally think about it. And to shift it to, what do I need to give so that my partner enjoy sex, is a radically different mind shift. And it really goes back to what scripture says. Philippians has got one of the best verses on sex when it talks about in Philippians chapter 2, don't merely look out for your own interests, but look out for the interests of others. I wish somebody had said that that's a great verse about sex.
Mm-hmm.
To actually become a detective of my wife's needs more than a dictator of my needs.
Mm-hmm.
And all too often, the reason why I'm frustrated, going back to what you said, Alisa, is because I come in with these expectations that I'm expecting you to meet. And when you don't meet, or when you're not at the same level, I get frustrated and I don't change my mind. I don't question my mind. I question your mind. I question your desire type. I question your desire level.
Well, you guys have both done an amazing service to just by not only uncovering that, Shaunti, in your research, but getting it out there. And one of the things we're going to hold up here for our listeners and viewers, your book, and I think this is one of the best places for them to find it. Right? It's The Secrets. Lisa, the exact title?
Secrets of Sex and Marriage, 8 Surprises That Make All the Difference.
Shaunti, is that where you would send them to at this point if they wanted to know more about the desire? We'll send them to a video too, by the way, but yeah.
Brian made such a good point earlier about the fact that really the antidote, thank you.
Antidote.
Thank you. The antidote for some of the problems that people have, the expectations that are just wonky, is communication, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just talking about it. And so, we wrote the book actually in order to help people be able to read a little bit and talk about it, and read a little bit and talk about it. Like, the whole book is written in such a way that, it's a normal book. You can just read it, but it's really designed to help you kind of get over the hump of, this is awkward to talk about. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to ask, because it really is like, oh, wow, is this true of you? This is how I feel. Is this how you feel? Like, it helps lower the bar a bit.
Yeah.
And
Brian,
Shaunti, do you still have, sorry, Chris, don't mean to interrupt you, but you still have assessment, don't you, on as far as figuring out your desire type, which I think is a great place to start.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
do.
Yeah.
If you go to secretsofsexandmarriage.com, which is the
It's
website.
not a porn site.
Yeah, it's not, I promise. It just goes with the book. It's got all the it's got actually some really good referral resources and stuff too.
That's great.
But there's an assessment there that can help them go, oh, this is me. This is you. Wow, let's talk about what that means.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I think would be helpful, I think the book is fantastic because it has all the stats there and it's short chapters. They really are surprising secrets. The assessment's awesome because it gives you an activity to talk about, because it's almost like that's a third party thing. So now, because it's just tough for couples, even if we say have a conversation, there are couples out there I would imagine listening going, well, we can't do that right now anyway. We don't know how to do that. That's our problem.
Yeah.
So it helps model that for you. I think the thing that I loved about our season, that was season 3 of Married with Benefits, is that you could listen to it as a couple, either separately, like while you're working out or when you're driving somewhere, and it's like, okay, we can listen to somebody and then we can just respond. They're giving us the words to talk. We had questions at the end of every session, I believe. And so it just allows you to go, okay, how can I process this with my partner?
Yeah.
Brian, I listened to somebody, I cannot remember where I was, but I think Jeff and I were speaking at an event somewhere, and someone came up who had listened to the season, this season, about basically Sexpectations, right, on Married with Benefits. I can't remember what the title of the season was, but they had listened to it with their spouse driving, like in a 10 or 12 or 15 hour long drive. And she said it was hilarious because they would get 100 yards and stop it and go, really?
Oh, yeah.
What Brian just said, is that you really? And then they'd start it again, and then they'd go another section of the highway and stop it and be like, what?
That's not what I thought you were going to say when they stopped.
No, me either. Yeah,
No.
Me either.
Yeah.
That was the next 100 yards.
Right?
Sorry, I'm initiating desire. Sorry, that's me.
That's so funny. Brian, the differences that happen here and let's just say the lack of communication and embarrassment. Let's go deep for just maybe 1 minute. You've studied in the seminary, you have that background. What is it that comes to mind? Why is there embarrassment? I mean, is it Shaunti, you mentioned briefly that this is a very sacred, almost moment that's spiritual. We would know from some of the New Testament writers that this was, and the Old Testament, that this models the relationship that God has with himself in the Trinity. I mean, it goes really deep theologically. So Brian, any take on that says, I think couples need to learn or hear that? I don't know if any thoughts come to mind, but I just wonder, is it something that happened at the fall where all of a sudden the shame comes in, an embarrassment of something that wasn't to be embarrassing? I mean, can we just chalk it up to the fall or what?
Well, I don't think that's a petty answer at all, Chris. I think there is because of what you just said, there is a sacredness to what this is to represent, as a physical representation and a manifestation of a very spiritual reality, that sex represents Christ's love for the church. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the first thing you see Satan attacking in relationships throughout the book of Genesis happens to be in the sexual arena. I mean, you see sex outside of marriage creating all kinds of devastation. And I can't remember who said it first. I've heard Ann Wilson say it. I'm sure it's been said by others in the past that, before marriage, Satan will do everything he can to get you in bed. After marriage, he will do everything he can to keep you out of bed.
It's a great thought.
There's that covenant bonding that takes place physiologically, but also I think theologically when a couple is bonding together. And so the more that he could do from a spiritual side to keep the shame, to keep this feeling awkwardness, like I think he rejoices when couples don't have conversations about this. So we can't just minimize that. And I think in our culture, we tend to think, oh, it's not a big deal. No, I think that is a big deal. But then I think the other thing is just modeling and confidence. Like for me, when I don't have confidence in an area as a man, I don't tend to move. I don't tend to go outside of my comfort zone. And it takes a lot, especially I think for guys, to come out of their comfort zone and really try to unpack this area that they think that's been modeled for them on TV and in songs and in media. This should just be easy. So when it's not easy, and I don't know how you work, I don't know how Jen's working or thinking, like I don't really want to move into that arena. And so I tend to get passive as a guy. That's me. Shaunti, you might have other insights on this.
No, I think you said it really well. I think it's true. We just, so you know, some numbers. I can't help myself. I'm sorry. Like all the data, right?
Bring it on. We love it.
I can't help it. I can't help it.
Comes out.
I'm a social psychologist, so you're good.
But the in the sexual arena, 73% of couples can't talk about it. Wow. And I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And by the way, we saw in the surveys, these are big, by the way, these are big nationally representative surveys, right? That we paid a lot of money for. But one of the things that we saw that was actually really instructive was when you ask people their opinion of how they talk about these things, like I think the number was like 50% said, oh yeah, we're fine, and then like 2 questions later, they would say things like, well, no, but I don't want to tell them what I want because, I'm embarrassed. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, you don't fit into the, you talk about it well category. And so it really is, this area is so dramatically helped just by giving people the permission to say, yeah, it's awkward, but if you talk about it a little bit, guess what? It gets less awkward. And we're not talking about like body parts and whatever. We're talking about the inner stuff that's going on underneath the surface. And that's a lot easier to talk about.
Yeah, and that whole notion of can't talk about it, they just it's almost as if you, like Brian said, Brian, you almost don't want to move into that because there's a lack of confidence. Is it a lack of confidence? It is a lack of confidence. What else is there in addition? To me, the awkwardness is fascinating. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's part of it. Certainly not the only thing. There could be shame. There could be a sense of the past that just kind of continues to come into the equation. I mean, I think there's probably all kinds of different reasons, but I think what I love about what Shaunti said is that 73% of people or couples don't know how to do this. So you're not alone. So if you feel all of that, if anything, you should feel encouragement that you're not alone, that
Sorry.
that's okay. I'm like seeing these bright flashes. I'm not sure if like what's going on or
Yeah, a little bit of a lightning storm here, or we did not pay the bill. Hey, talk about needing to get some payment here for our bill. So go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, so I think that encourages me to go, okay, you're not alone. Only 27% of the people actually have healthy conversations when it comes to this in their marriage. So, all right, where do we start? I think that's the thing, and that's the thing that I really appreciate about Shaunti and Dr. Seisman's work is that it really is little conversations go a long way. And in fact, Shaunti, tell the story about Dr. Seisman and about the couple that comes in their office and how he gets them to talk about the number. And do you remember what I'm talking about? How he asks them questions, like each one, he comes in and they're frustrated because they're not having as much frequency of sex. And so he turns to the guy and he goes, well, okay, well, how often do you want to have sex? And he's like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
He said 1 to 2.
He said 1 to 2. And what did the girl say?
She said 2 to 3.
She said 2 to 3. And he's like, I don't see a lot of difference between 2 and 3.
2 and 2, right?
2. I mean, they're both 1 off. Like they're 1 number off, if that. And sometimes some weeks there's 2. They're both the same. It's just that because they don't talk about it, and both couple looked at each other, going, "Really? Like expectations in silence."
I thought one of the best lines from that couple, and apparently like everybody else who sits in Dr. Mike's office, right? But I thought one of the best lines was the husband turned to the wife and said, well, if we both want to have sex twice a week, why aren't we? And Mike goes, yes, that's the right answer, because usually it's why aren't you?
Yes.
As opposed to why aren't we? There's something that's getting in the way of what both of us want. So what is that? Or what are those things? And putting yourself kind of proverbially on the same side of the table, to try to figure something out rather than adversarially across the table, pointing at the other person.
And I was going to say on that, Chris, when you're talking about why, I think that's a huge reason. The why is it's your problem. It's not my problem. Yeah. And when couples finally start going, it's our problem, or how am I the problem in this? Like when I start asking those questions, then there's a sense of, okay, we can work on this. But if it's always adversarial and we're looking at each other going, you're the problem, you don't want to have a conversation with somebody you feel like you're an enemy with.
Brian, that's full circle right back to Philippians, right? 2, 3, 4. It's this whole divide that keeps us saying you, it's not me, versus I'm going to stop this whole notion of my interests and start thinking. And that's the reestablishment of a we in the relationship.
And I think that the opposite could also, I could see happening too, that instead of saying it's you, I don't want to talk about it because I'm afraid as we talk, it's going to be me.
Oh, good.
And that makes me feel very vulnerable. That makes me feel very bad.
This isn't about guilty. Her personal life experiences whatsoever. She's just
hypothetically. But I really think that could be a big part of it is that, I feel a lot of shame. I feel embarrassment. I feel inadequate. Kind of what you were saying that men can feel where they don't feel competent or confident in this area. I think we as women, we have so many issues about our bodies, about measuring up to what we see in culture and TV, on Instagram, with all the filters, the porn, where a lot of people are getting their information about what sex should be like, how it should be, what I should do, what I should like as a woman. And I find that I don't. And if we talk about it, that's just going to be a big red flag that's pointing at me. And I'm not sure I'm ready to handle that.
I can help every man out there understand this, what you just said, actually.
Good. Yes,
because
please.
one of the things that we hear, and I'm sure you guys hear it too, for Weekend to Remember, which is such an amazing event, but any marriage conference, who are the people who are signing up for it and dragging their spouse versus the ones being drugged?
Yeah.
It's usually the wife dragging the husband. Now, there's plenty of exceptions to that, which is awesome, but that's generally it. And why is that? When we ask the men, here's what they say. Yeah, great. Another thing where I'm going to need to be fixed. Right? Like we're going to spend a weekend with you fixing me because I'm not doing it right. I'm broken. And so they're reluctant to go, understandably, which, by the way, is what I love about Weekend to Remember, is it's not like that at all. It's very, very much liberating on both sides and all that. But it's that for all the men out there who've ever felt that, that's probably what your wife feels about this area. Like, great, an area, I can't do anything right. I need to be fixed. And, I'm broken. We all know it. We see it in Hollywood. I don't look anything like that. I don't handle it like that. I don't desire sex in that way. I'm clearly broken. And both people think the person with receptive desire is broken. The person with receptive desire feels that, and the spouse kind of thinks they are too. And so it's completely liberating. When you start talking about it and you learn this knowledge and you're like, oh my gosh, nobody's broken. This is just the way we're created.
Yeah, that's really freeing
It
to have that perspective.
I want to ask too this question. It's related and transition just real briefly to those that aren't married, those that are receiving their information now from much more varied sources than the four of us ever did. Growing up, could you imagine what it would have been like to have a cell phone in high school that had images right at your fingertips?
Oh, in junior high and elementary school.
Or in junior high, elementary school now. Yeah, you're exactly right. Brian, you guys also have another video that explains this amazing phenomenon, the supranormal stimulus that Shaunti, I know you guys probably have talked about, or at least I know, Brian, you did in your pornography work. That supranormal stimulus being the butterfly that has the fake butterfly with these huge wings, all female, all the males are attracted to the fake butterfly with the very big wings and ignore the live butterflies that are the female. And it just shows what the power, I believe, of stimulus is. And now that power resides with very young kids in our very homes, sometimes in our bedroom, in their bedrooms, while the parents are doing something else. Let's talk about that. You both have kids that are in their young teens, middle 20s. We do too. Man, I'm worried a little bit about the impact this is having, by the way, not just on men, but there are more and more women who are finding something, Shaunti, in the middle of this that is either a little bit more emotionally connected. I don't know what the difference is. So you two, let's talk a little bit about, do you worry for this generation, the access that they have and its impact on marriages? I know it may be a rhetorical question.
Shaunti?
Oh man, you just opened a can of worms. Yes, of course, everybody is and rightfully should be worried about this social media access to any image you want in, private temptations constantly. The classic thing is you used to have to go to a store to buy those magazines, and now it's every 5 seconds if you want to look at it. And the reality is we're in a new world. It's not like you can put this genie back into the bottle, right? This is not going to be something, as much as we wish it was, this is not going to be something that is ever going to be undone. This is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I wish it wasn't the case, but, you know, just sort of dealing with the world as it is, are one of the things that I noticed as a parent is that my efforts for years now have been to help my kids navigate, and myself, right, like everybody, navigate this new reality rather than, oh, it shouldn't be that way.
Mhm.
Right? Like everybody is going to have those temptations. To say otherwise is kind of like ignoring the reality. And so, what does it mean to help a teenage boy? What does it mean to help him when he's young, when he's 4, 5, 6 years old? What does it mean when he's in middle school? What does it mean when he's in high school? What does it mean when he gets text messages, slightly hypothetical, not hypothetical, when he gets text messages from a girl saying, hey, send me some pictures, right? Because that's powerful. Like, that's a powerful feeling for a young man. Some woman wants to see me. And to go, okay, first of all, what are the likelihood that that's actually a girl, as opposed to like somebody on the other side of the world who's a guy who's trying to do something. What is it just from a mind perspective, but then what is it that it's triggering in me that I want to look at those things? And here's a young woman in this picture. This is a child of God who's probably in some way feeling trapped in this life of showing herself in this way. And is there a way that you can see her like that? Like those kinds of conversations, those are not things that just come up when somebody turns 18 or whatever. Those are parental conversations all the way through, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, Australia, Brian, just to intercede one little point, just recently passed a ban that said, and I don't know if you guys are familiar, just this week, that said there will be no, they want to block access to all social media for anybody under the age of 16. Have you guys heard this? Yeah.
I have not. This news to me, Chris. Thanks for bringing it to me.
Yeah. So Australia is trying this, and I guess the question, is that going to work? Is that effective? Our worlds are so tied into that in good ways, right? I mean, Shaunti, you talk about opening up this can of worms. There's so much good about technology. Nobody is ever saying, let's just get rid of the phones. Let's just, completely, take sabbaticals away from all that, which can actually work. But what you guys are both implying is there has to be a lot of parental involvement in this, because otherwise culture is just going to push the opposite message. I don't know if that's going to work, by the way.
I don't either. I will tell you, as an analyst, I'll tell you my the big obvious gaping huge hole that you could drive a Humvee through, right? Like I mean, is the law that's passed, if it survives like the courts or whatever it is that they do, the law basically says that it's up to the parents to enforce it, not up to anybody else. And it's something like I think it's about 70% of the parents in the country support this law. Yep. Which is good, but that means 30% don't. And so if you have a third of the kids in school on their phone and social media because their parents aren't enforcing it, how well is that, and how long is that going to last? Like a day? Like I hate to be cynical, but I feel like we have to have a different coping skills and personal management skills that are built, because anyway,
it's hard enough having a real conversation with your kid, right? I mean, it's just difficult, especially about this issue. I mean, immediately you talk about not feeling confident. And then on top of that, just you're more tired as an adult, especially with teen kids. You're getting more tired. And I'm just finding that, man, the phone is a great panacea for both the parent and the kid. And it can become easy to train yourself to not have conversations, because you're just like, you know what, it's peaceful when we're both watching screens. We're not having fights. I want to chill. I want to relax. They seem to be fine. And I think that's the underlying of this is it really takes a lot of courage and initiative to go, okay, we're going to have screen Sabbaths in our home, where we lock them away for a certain amount of time and they're going to go off at 9 o'clock or whatever it might be. And you've got to come up with all of those kind of rules. And then you've got to actually enforce them, because if you're not consistent, like what Shaunti says, like you do it 30% of the time, well, you'll find that 30% turns to 50% real quick. And then, we're just not being consistent, and kids don't respect when seeing consistency. And so that's why I think that this conversation, we have a great opportunity that the world has given us with these cell phones and with digital and with media to engage the conversation earlier and often. And so I like what Access, I don't know if anybody in your audience, if they have either young kids or teenagers, look at axis.org. They have great materials on how do you have a great conversation about the cell phone and about media and about just having good boundaries and why and what's good about technology. Because ultimately we want to have people say, what's good about sex? We still want to keep that positive image of it's not all bad. It's actually the reason why you have that hunger to show those pictures is because there's something inside of you that's a powerful force. But that powerful force, it needs a great place to get released. And then released in marriage. And that seems unfair and harsh and hard, but we can talk about why that is and talk about your journey and what you've experienced. And so I think it's a great opportunity for parents to move into those conversations and to start helping model what that conversation looks like. But it's really difficult.
Yeah. It is difficult.
It's hard.
And it's not like that's the only thing that we need to be talking with our kids about to teach them how to navigate, right? We're teaching them how to navigate alcohol. We're teaching them how to navigate integrity and not cheating in class on their tests. We're teaching them integrity in their friendships. And how do you navigate when you feel left out or when somebody's spreading rumors about you? And so, but for some reason, this tends to be an area that we leave out because we don't feel comfortable. And so I can talk to you all day long about lying, but it's going to be hard to talk with you about sex. So, so it's not unheard for parents. This is just one more area, I mean, parenting is not for the weak, right?
No, too, that trend line, have you ever seen a 2-year-old with a cell phone? I mean, they know how to scroll and move. I mean, these young babies, that you would think they actually, I go to our 2-year-old granddaughter for advice on how to get an app downloaded, and so she grabs the phone.
How do I use this?
And that trend line can be either encouraging or discouraging, like you both mentioned. And when it comes to sex, then that message that let's say now these teens and college students that we're all, loving and want to, encourage, what advice would you give? And I'll start with just this little piece. One of the things we encourage, a guy named Dr. Tim Muehlhoff, we co-teach a class with him and his wife, Noreen, and others. And one of the things we started was a tech fast. And we set boundaries around what that means. Like, if you could do other fasts as well in that regard from, friend groups or from social media. And it doesn't have to be a complete ban. It might just be, I'm not going to go on TikTok anymore. I'm not going to go, onto Instagram. But it has, when we get these college students writing back, the impact on them is pretty profound because they're recognizing the amount of time they're spending on this. It was consuming a lot of their emotional reserves. It was consuming a lot of their social capital because they were more invested in that. So thoughts that you guys have on navigating things like a tech fast or on providing, boundaries and directions. Do you guys have other thoughts that you're like, man, I wish 18 to 25-year-old people who are navigating this world of sex from the culture and then the anticipation of that in marriage, what advice do you have for someone who's out there going, okay, I know it's going to be awkward in marriage, but what about now?
Well, I'll start And I know Shaunti will have some great wisdom too. But I think one thing is it's easy for me to my mind to go, man, don't get addicted to the exaggerations that you're going to see in media and all of that. It's easy to kind of go there. But I want to flip the pendulum back to the other side. And that is, because there's so much exaggerated views that going back to that super simulus of sex that can ultimately set you up for frustration. And I would tell my own story. I mean, I think that's one thing. Is it's really important for the older generation to be super honest and transparent with what they dealt with, to train what transparency could look like in the future. So I think that's a big deal. It's just be honest with your own, whatever your journey was, be honest in telling it. But then I would say, hey, be detectives during that 18 to 25-year-old range. Talk to people that have healthy relationships that you can see. And the media, I mean, even when you just say that, talk to people who have healthy relationships. It's amazing how you already know what that looks like. You don't even have to give qualifiers or criteria, or it's like, I know because I've been to Biola's campus and I've seen students hanging around with you guys and how they respect you too. And people like the Muehlhoffs, they know that they could get in a room and have a lunch with Chris and Alisa and have a great conversation because they see a relationship and it models a sense of health. And it's like, okay, think of 5 healthy couples that you know of and make it a point over the next 3 to 4 years or next year to have a lunch with them, every couple months. Take them out to eat, over to their house, have coffee, and ask them some of those questions, about intimacy, about healthy relationships. What does that look like? What do I need to prepare myself with? There's so much wisdom that's just out there that kids could lap up. And I wish I had been given that mantra when I was 18 to 25.
Yeah. Well, it's not only a mantra here, it's a requirement. We make them interview 2 married couples as students. They have to go find, and they could choose a parent, or a relative. Most of them don't. But they also find that more freeing, not to go talk to a parent and interview them. But Brian, that's not just a mantra. It really is a requirement here that our students in our course, and there's at least 200 every semester that join this, that say that have to go interview a married couple. And boy, I'll tell you, they get some really fascinating insights. So Brian, I love that.
Another thing we do in that class, it's a 15-week class, upper level, juniors and seniors. And they can take it for an elective for psych or for communication. And we have 2 psych professors, we have 2 Bible professors, and then sometimes another 2 professors and their spouses. So there's 6 on our teaching team. Sometimes they're communication, Bible, and psych. And so we're looking at all kinds of issues of relationships through those 3 different lenses. So it's a very integrated class, 15 weeks. Really, it's an intensive relationship discipleship course is how we approach it. Yeah. And one of the things that we do is when we have the lecture, every week, we have a lecture from psychology, one from Bible, looking at that particular issue. And then after we have the 2 lectures, we open it up with a panel of the teaching team up there. We have a panel for Q&A. And then we have a place where the students can submit questions anonymously.
Oh, so
we have an actual 2-parter on God's design for sexual intimacy. And then what does he really mean by one flesh? And really flesh out for them that God's design for this area is so much more than just the physical, but it's also the emotional one flesh, the relational one flesh, the social one flesh, the financial one flesh, the spiritual one flesh, and look at the robustness of that. And then to open it up for, the section or the lecture that we have where we look at pornography. We spend one whole evening, 3 hours, delving into the psychological aspects of porn, the biblical aspects
stealing
of it.
The videos from FamilyLife to show in there.
Oh, and it's fascinating. But when you open it up for those anonymous questions that they can submit, it gets pretty real pretty darn quick.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We tell them, you know what? This is the time for you to ask these kind of questions. You have 6 seasoned, godly, well-equipped, well-trained, married couples. really smart. We are really smart.
Good
You can
looking.
ask us. And so they do. And that's one of the things that comes back in the evaluations is that they said, oh my gosh, this is so nice to have somebody whose credibility and faith walk with God, we feel like we can really trust and ask really real questions and get thoughtful, meaningful, correct, ways of thinking about it. We don't always want to tell them what to think, but we want to help them process and think through it wisely.
Yeah.
So they can wrestle through that with the Lord and come to a really godly, well-informed conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So we love that class.
Mhm.
That's
And-
awesome. So
and-
when you come and speak in
Yeah, I
our,
was gonna
at our
say-
family life, we're going to also tap you to come and speak to our class that night.
Oh, I thought you
That's
meant we
awesome.
could just come listen. I just want to go listen. It sounds
Oh,
so good.
no. You
We-
won't get off that easy.
No, you don't get off that easy. You both are now publicly invited on social media, of all things, to come and do that.
That's
And
it.
we could think of no better experts because
Oh, it'd be
Shaunti, your work, we refer to it, I would say, almost every other lecture. Brian, we show all your videos and other things
Yeah.
and talk about family life. Lisa,
Super helpful resources. Okay, so as we wrap up, are you ready for a lightning round?
Ooh.
This is just going to be some
Okay.
quick questions right off the top of your head. What comes to your mind first? And then, and just like a 15, 20-second answer, 30 at the most. You ready?
Yep.
Okay, number one, Brian, what's the funniest thing you ever heard from couples about their sex life at their conferences?
Oh gosh.
That is not a lightning round.
I know.
Go
That's-
on, lightning round.
what's the
Yeah.
most interesting, amazing, funny,
Awkward.
awkward?
I think. Oh gosh, you got me on that. That's
Okay, let's go to
Okay,
Shaunti.
wait, I have one.
Okay,
Okay.
Go ahead,
Sean.
Sean.
I
It
won.
might come to me.
Okay, so Jeff and I were doing a date night and talking about this, and we showed the pie chart of how often people have sex and said, this percent daily or more. It was, I think, 4% of couples have sex daily or more, and this couple in the front row looked at each other and high-fived.
We're a
That's
4%er.
We're in. I'll give
Oh.
you one, Brian, while you're thinking. At our very last conference, I don't even remember what town we were in. For Family Life, we did this
This is
conference, and
smart.
we asked them, do you guys have any words that you use, like in
code
front of the
words.
kids, a code word for sex? And somebody jumped up and said spaghetti, and apparently, for whatever reason, we never figured it out. But when they say, "Hey, would you like to go make some spaghetti?" it was code. And so now I'm telling you, for the rest of that weekend, everybody was
Having
using
spaghetti.
spaghetti and Italian food. So I told them
Best.
mine was fettuccine Alfredo is our code word.
That's
Uh,
great. Oh my
no,
God.
so Lisa, do you have anything that comes?
You know what is that? It's that same question when we were talking about code words,
Uh-huh.
like those 4 ingredients of a great
Yeah.
sex life. Sometimes playful code words, and we were doing this at a conference at a church, and one couple raised their hands, and their code word was boom boom.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to
Code
go
words are
boom boom?
funny.
And I was like,
we
oh my
were
gosh,
out with
boom boom.
this wasn't with somebody in the crowd, but we were out with some of the speakers one night having dinner on Saturday night after the talk, and we just started asking each other, okay, do you guys have a code word or some type of a physical sign that you give to each other? And one of the other speakers, there were 6 of us, one of the other speakers goes, yeah, we do, and I've already done it to my husband at dinner. And I was like, I was wondering why he was wrapping up and ready to get the bill.
Wait,
What's the
who wants
deal?
dessert? We gotta go.
Give me
I
the
was like,
bill.
what is it? What is it? She would not let us in.
That's funny.
Okay, and one last one on our lightning round. What is your best piece of advice when it comes to Sexpectations? What do you want to close with? What do you want them to know? What's your big takeaway?
My most important one is to be curious.
Mm.
And just don't assume that you understand. You need to ask. You need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Man, that's a good word,
Love that.
Shaunti. That's great.
Curious.
Mhm.
Brian?
That's I mean, I was really gonna say move from being a dictator, just demanding what you want out of sex.
Mhm.
Stop viewing it through your eyes and start seeing it through their eyes. Going,
Mhm.
how can I meet their needs? How can I look at
Mhm.
sex and go, how do I meet their needs more than I think about my needs?
Dictator to
Mhm.
detective, I think you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's a
Oh, I
great
like
line.
that.
Yeah.
That's a great title. I think for me, at least, the idea of a detective really impacted us. And really what it took was trying to get down to the emotion of you. And that required a lot of listening by me. And there's this phrase that says it's better to be understanding than understood. And it's better to be interested than interesting. And I remember just saying to Alisa, okay, I'm going to just be quiet for like 10, 20, 30 minutes, just talk. Tell me what goes on in your mind. And that's the day I learned that she was in neutral. She was receptive. And it changed the way she goes, Chris, it's not like I think sex is wonderful. I just don't think about it every 4 minutes like you do. And I said, at least that's not true. It's not every 4. It's like 7 or 8. It's not 4.
Seconds.
But it really was eye-opening. So that would be my advice, Lisa, is to seek to be understanding and get at the heart and really try and say, okay, can I just hear your heart right now? That's what I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess mine would be, if this is an area that's really tough for you, that you've struggled in it for a while now, don't give up on it. There are people out there that have specific training in this area of sexual intimacy, sexual dysfunction, sexual woundedness, marriage and family therapists, that they actually go to school and have additional training to be certified in this particular area. Help is out there. Please, please, please don't put it off. Don't wait. Go today. You Google some places online, check with some your pastoral resources. Oftentimes they will have referrals that they can point you to. And definitely that was going to be my other one, is go pick up this book today.
Yes.
We're going to link to it in the show notes. We're going to link to your podcast.
Yeah,
Married
tell us your
with
podcast
Benefits.
one more time, so how they find it.
It's Family Life's Married with Benefits, and this one that we're talking about was season 3. It was questions every couple's asking about intimacy.
Okay.
And
they can find it on Spotify. They can find it at Family Life.
Anywhere.
They can find it anywhere.
I listen to it on Spotify.
Yeah,
It's
just make sure you get the right Married with
Get the right one.
That's
The Family Life one. Yeah.
Family Life one.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're going to wrap up today. Brian, Shaunti, thank you for, we know that you're super busy. You have 1,000 things pulling on your time, your attention. So we really appreciate that you worked us into your schedule today, and we're better because you were here today.
Yeah. And thank you guys too for your pastimes coming to Biola. We look forward to getting you guys back out here in Southern California.
And so for our viewers, our listeners, we want to say thank you for joining us again. Just take a moment to hit that like button. Give us 5 stars. We would really love to have that review on there. Let us know how the podcast is impacting you, how it's impacted your life. What are some takeaways? We would love to hear it. And then as we say goodbye, we just want to say that's a wrap for this episode. Check the show notes for links, and we will see you next time on The Art of Relationships. Bye-bye.